Welcome everyone to Hall Creek Baptist Church today. It's good to see each one of you out this morning. Sort of cold morning, but we're just thankful that God's given us this good, warm, dry place to come to worship Him today. If you're visiting with us, we thank you for coming, and we want you to make yourself at home, and we trust that something will be said or done, it'll be a blessing to you. And we can all count ourselves blessed, I feel like, according to my thermometer, about one more degree lower, and we could have been in a mess, but it didn't make it. So, of course, all we can do is take it as the Lord sends it. And He said He'd always be there with us. He'd never leave us and never forsake us. He'd get us through anything that He sent our way. So we're thankful to be able to be at God's house this morning. Be very much in prayer as we continue to sing, and then we'll come and try to do that the Lord would bid us to do. So at this time, if you stand on your feet, we'll fellowship one with another. Let our visitors know we appreciate them being here this morning, and children, you can come get your candy. And we'll never figure them out. Thank you. At this time, we'd ask you to remain standing while they come forward to take a Sunday morning offering. I hope all can say this morning that it's well with your soul. If it's not well with your soul this morning, you're missing the point of us being here. But I'm thankful that I can say it is well with my soul. Enjoy the song service. Always enjoy the choir. Enjoy what I can feel. We're going to be reading this morning out of the book of Genesis, the 39th chapter. We're going to read about Joseph this morning. But first, over in the book of Psalms, the 30th chapter and the 5th verse, says, "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning." The thought on our mind today, in a moment. In a moment, do we realize how things can change in just a moment? The Bible talks about in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye. But we find the circumstances here that Joseph was in. And we need to realize that however our circumstances are, that and they may appear certainly, and eventually they'll change. We're going to change from this life to that heavenly life in a moment and in a twinkling of an eye. When we close our natural eyes in death and this natural body shuts down, we're not going to have to wait 30 minutes or an hour or two. The Bible says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. In a moment. That's how quick it'll be. But here, nevertheless, here in Joseph's life, we all know the story of Joseph, what he went through. But how that God had revealed to him the dreams that he had. And he had to go through, he went through a lot before, and no doubt he thought, no doubt with all that he went through and had to contend with, I guess he got to the point in his life where he didn't think those dreams would ever come true. They'd never be realized. But God had plans for Joseph. In the 39th chapter, at the beginning of the first verse, "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down hither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand." We know how that Joseph, there, he'd had these dreams, and he'd revealed those dreams to that of all of his brothers. And we know how that it had made his brothers angry. And they wouldn't have it. They didn't want Joseph to be superior over them. And you know, I've wondered so many times, it don't matter what position we hold in life, whether you're a Sunday school teacher or a choir director, a song leader, a deacon, preacher, whatever, just because we hold those positions and those titles in our life doesn't mean that we're above anyone else. But here his brothers, they seemed to think that he was going to be over them and how mean he was going to be and all that. So it angered them. And we know how the story goes, how they took him and they were planning on killing him and they decided not to. One of the brothers talked him out of doing that, and how they threw him in the pit and they took his coat and killed an animal and put blood over it and carried it back to his father. And his father said, well, sure, he's dead. But then this Ishmaelites came along and they sold him to them. Then we find here that Potiphar, the officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard of the Egyptians, he bought, from the Ishmaelites, he bought Joseph. And he brought him back there to live in Egypt. And they put him, no doubt, he spent time in prison, but here they brought him out. I guess you talk like we call it good behavior, I guess, so to speak. And he brought him before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh was carried away with the way he was and the way he acted and all. But there that Pharaoh told him that what he was going to be in charge of all there in Egypt, everything. Pharaoh told him there would only be one person that would be over him, and he said that would be me. But here there that he came and he did as God told him to do. But yet he had that dream that God had showed him there, and no doubt when he went in prison he thought, he said this can never be. It's never going to come to fruition. It'll never happen. But you know, we have to be patient today. You know what we have to do? We have to hold on to that what is good and hold on to it. And not worry about too much about the troubles and the trials and the responsibilities and these burdens that we carry. And have patience and wait on the Lord. The Bible teaches us that we're to be patient and wait on the Lord. But here, no doubt, Joseph, he thought this was never going to happen there. But here, he got sold. He went down there and he come before this Pharaoh and he put him in charge. He said, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this is going to happen. You'll turn over in Genesis to the 41st chapter, the 14th verse. Now see, after this, he went through some difficulty in his life. Pharaoh's wife had tried to get him to lay with her, and she'd more or less framed Joseph. Well, the dreams he'd had was washed away. He said, it ain't never going to happen. But see, his faith began to get weak. Listen today, the Bible said, as our faith is, so shall it be unto you today. Trust in the Lord with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our soul today. But here Joseph, he got his hopes up, and then because of Pharaoh's wife had framed him there, a false accusation she had made against him, he got put back in prison again. And I no doubt he thought, well, my hopes are gone. My hopes are gone. I'll never realize the dreams that God gave me that I had. Said it'll never happen there. Then we know what happened. Pharaoh, he had a dream. And no one could interpret that dream. But here they was told, said there was one man down there in prison that could interpret that dream. His name was Joseph, and he said, have him to come. And here Pharaoh said and called Joseph
And they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph told him yes, and he interpreted the dream. And we know what the dream was that Pharaoh had about how that there was going to be a famine. Joseph interpreted this too. There'd be so many years of plenty, and then there'd be so many years they wouldn't have anything. And he warned them to store up for that time, and he did. And see, after he came and he made this dream, interpreted this dream here to Pharaoh. Pharaoh showed favor on him again, and he made him again one of the rulers there of all over the people under Pharaoh, that he might. And we see how that his dream was accomplished again. And we see there how later on we see there that how that his brothers had come down there to Egypt there, and how they had found out and discovered who Joseph was. And then he sent them back. And then his father and all of his brothers came back down to Egypt there, and they all lived because of the famine that was in there, and they had plenty there. But see, Joseph, what I'm getting at today, Joseph, he was in prison, doomed, didn't think he'd ever be able to realize those dreams that God had showed him there. But in a moment today, in a moment, things change. That's how quick things can happen today. Things can change in a moment. You know, as I quoted there about how that joy comes in the morning. We may go to bed tonight and things may be terrible. We can't seem to see no light in the tunnel, maybe. At the end of the tunnel, and we get up the next morning and things seem like they're a lot brighter there. That's what happened to Joseph. After he'd went through all this, he could see the light at the end of the tunnel. He see things begin to realize, and he see that those dreams that he had, that God had showed him there, it was coming to fruition. It was going to happen today. So that's what we need to do today. Because sooner or later things will change. Things will change. We find over in Genesis, in the 22nd chapter, the great story about Abraham there, how said Abraham, and it came to pass that these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, behold, Lord, here am I. And he said, take now thy son, thy only son, whom thou lovest, get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. See, God had promised Abraham that he was going to take this son Isaac and was going to bless him, how that he was going to bless him and use Isaac. And his seed would be great. And no doubt Abraham was excited about that. Then here God comes to Abraham. Things begin to change, don't they? They begin to change. Here he comes, Abraham, said, Abraham, I want you to take your son Isaac, and I want you to take him there to Mount Moriah, and I want you to offer him there as a sacrifice. And no doubt he says to himself, God, why would you want this to happen? You told me you through my son you were going to bless how you was and multiply his seed. And now you tell me take him and offer him as a sacrifice. See, Abraham, he was happy and joyful before God spoke, because God had gave him this son and told him what he was going to use him for and what was going to happen. And then he comes to Abraham and says, take him and offer him as a sacrifice. Well, no doubt Abraham, he was just like we was. But we dropped to the bottom. We dropped to the bottom. But then he made his way, and we know the story. How he went, he told the men to wait there. He said, me and the son will return. And he carried him, no doubt, and he got him up there, and he got him up on that mountain, and took him and prepared the altar. tied him up, laid him across that altar. Ready, raised the knife, the Bible says, fixing to offer his only begotten Son there is a sacrifice. And this angel out of heaven said, whoa, don't do it, Abraham. Don't do it. Don't do it. See, things changed in a moment. In a moment, he was ready to give his son, the one God had promised him when he was old, him and Sarah, and told him how he was going to use him, and how he was going to bless, and how his seed would be. And then he was going to have to offer him as a sacrifice. And then, in a moment, it changed. No doubt he was happy then, yes, wouldn't he? We would all have been. But things happen. Things happen today. You know, our timeline is different than God's timeline. Bible says our ways are different than God's ways. So here, Abraham, he offered his son, and then he was willing to do it. His dreams had been shattered, no doubt. And then that angel spoke out. Said, no, don't do it, Abraham. You know, I thought about Paul over there we read about in the New Testament. We know what kind of man Paul was in the beginning. He was a man, it was persecuting the church, killing Christians, right and left, doing everything that he could to destroy the church. You talk about a man that had Satan in him, that was a man that did today. He was a terrible man at that time. And we know what happened there. As he was on the Damascus road, started in Damascus, going in there to try to destroy the church there. Kill Christians there. That's what his main object was in life there. And the Bible said there, on the road to Damascus, God struck him down. A great light shone down above on him, blinded him. See what happened there to Paul. In a moment, he was on his way into Damascus to do that he'd always done. Persecute the church and kill the Christians yet. And then God shone down that light and blinded him. And what happened? He changed his life. He changed his life after that day. What? It happened in just a moment. Just a moment. Just as soon as that light shone down on him and it blinded him. That's the way it was when we're saved by the grace of God. We kneel on a mourner's bench and we're lost and undone and we have no hope. And then we ask God to save us, and then it seemed like just in a moment it all changes. It changed for Joseph. It changed for Abraham. It changed for Paul. And every one of us that's been saved by the grace of God today is changed for you and I. It's changed for you and I today. In a moment. I read this prayer the other night. And it says, Jesus, help me to hold on until your help comes. My life is in your hands. Amen. See, that's what Joseph did. He held on till God came. Abraham, he held on till God came. God sent that angel and told him not to hold back, not to kill his son. Hold on. I thought about when Abraham, when he left to go do that, he says, me and the lad will return. He had faith, but he was willing to do that God wanted him to do. Hold on. Whatever your circumstance is today, whatever you're going through in life, I don't know what it is today, but hold on. It'll certainly change. It'll certainly change. things don't always, your circumstances are not always the same. They don't always stay that way. They change, and they can change in a moment. They did in Joseph's life. They did in Abraham's life. They did in Paul's life. And he does the same thing in your life and my life today. And I'm thankful that in a moment, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. In a moment, in a twinkling of an eye. That's how quick things can change. We never know. We never know today. But as that prayer says, Jesus, help me to hold on until your help comes. My life is in your hands. We brought that this morning. The Lord laid on our heart. We're going to ask Wayne if he would to come with a song. We'll stand on our feet and sing. We don't know what your circumstances are today, but they can change in just a moment. We have to turn it over to God today, those circumstances, because there's nothing that he can't, nothing he don't control, nothing he can't handle. No problem too big, no problem too small. No mountain that he can't move. No ocean that he can't cross today. That's how powerful God is today. And he can do it in a moment. Stand and sing when you're ready.
Church Hymn, page 230.
Anybody a word in any way?
Thank you for asking prayer for Reese Lamb, because they really do need the prayers. I texted Corey just to see, and it's pretty much what she put on Facebook. They're doing a NG tube, is that a feeding tube? I don't know. Today, she hasn't had food in 7 days because she retches and can't keep anything down. They're going to do a spinal tap to see, and they might have to put a shunt in. But this is her third bout of being in the hospital with this. It's just been hard for them. Reese is absolutely a powerful presence to be around and a follower of Jesus for sure. So just keep them in your prayers.
Remember that. Anyone else? If not, we thank you for being here this morning. If you're visiting, we invite you to come be with us anytime you can. Nothing else about it. Harold Bowland, you dismiss us.
Thank you again for allowing us to wake up, allowing us to Lord. Thank you for the opportunity, Lord. Help, Lord, to be here today, Lord. Thank you for the message we heard today, and the message that we delivered. Lord, we ask that you continue to bless us here at Hall Creek. Lord, we ask, we know there's a lot of people in our church, Lord, in the area who are sick, Lord. We